Good morning. Lee Anderson to move the motion. Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is indeed a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. This debate is not the type of debate I'm looking forward to be honest, because it's filled with sadness and sorrow, and I'm delighted to be joined by some of the families from Ashfield who's been affected by baby loss in the past couple of years or so. Every day in the UK, according to the Royal College of Midwives, there's 1,845 babies born alive, and between 302 and 428 miscarriages every single day in this country. We have 8 stillbirths per day, and 145 babies are born prematurely and 5 neonatal deaths. Now, when there's a pregnancy announced in the family, on most occasions, it is a joyous, wondrous time in people's lives. They're so happy. Dads are making plans for their son to be a footballer. They've picked the football team already. Mum's looking at princess dresses, even though the baby's about that big, as big as your thumb. Grandparents are squabbling who's going to have rights to the new grandchild, who's going to be looking after. And there's all sorts of plans, what schools they're going to go to. And this is especially for first-time mothers. It is, you know, a strange time, a wondrous time, a joyful time. And once all that settles down, then would-be parents sometimes get a little bit apprehensive, a little bit scared, get worried about, you know, the baby. Is he going to be well? Is he going to be born well? Is he going to develop properly? And so it turns from, you know, being happy to being concerned, but still being happy. But there are quite a few risks, as we know, in pregnancy and during birth and the postnatal period. But every preventable stillbirth, neonatal death or infant death of a child is a tragedy, and we must make all efforts to prevent it happening. And the families I brought here today, I believe and they believe, and the hospital believes that these deaths were preventable. Mistakes have been made, things have been missed, and I'm hoping today that the ministerial team can give these families something so they can go away and know that they've been listened to. But there are other factors apart from mistakes, such as diabetes, obesity, drinking too much, smoking, other factors in pregnancy which can affect how a baby develops and ultimately how healthy that baby is once it's born. But yes, but like I say, in these cases, mistakes have been made. And I've spoken to some of the families. I've got 2 families here today. And I'm going to read out their stories, not my words, their words. I asked them to print their words and their story so I could read it out here in Westminster Hall. And the first one is Rob and Emma Stretton. And they want to tell the story of Olivia. And this is from Rob. On the 31st of May, 2023, Emma and I attended a routine scan at Kingsmill Hospital in Mansfield. During the scan, a few issues arose. The sonographer called for the assistance from her senior, and a recommendation was made to contact a consultant. His decision was that Emma needed admitting immediately for observation. The time was approximately 2:30 p.m. We were taken upstairs to the maternity unit, where the situation was explained to a midwife at the nurse's station. Her reply was that we should return later as no beds were available, and a phone call should have been made to the ward prior to attending. The consultant suggested for us to return in a couple of hours, to which the midwife replied this wouldn't be feasible due to the shift changeover. She said between 9:30 and 8 o'clock at night would be better. After this, we left for home and returned to the ward about 7:45. Emma was admitted for monitoring, and once she was settled, I returned home. Upon entering the house, I received a phone call from the midwife advising me to return as soon as possible, as no fetal heartbeat could be obtained. I went straight back to the ward to be informed that our baby had died. Emma was given medication to induce labour and gave birth to our stillborn daughter 3 days later at 18:30 p.m. The next story is from Bianca Chapman, and this is Amelia's story. My placenta was completely covering my cervix. I was a high-risk pregnancy. I had a bleed in November and wasn't given much advice on any risks on the early hours of the 3rd of 12, 2022. I had a big bleed and went into Kingsmill Hospital, and the registrar raised a concern but was ignored by the consultant in the space of just over 24 hours. I then had several more bleeds, and it wasn't until my daughter's heartbeat baseline stopped beating I was considered to be allowed surgery. The consultant in charge had gone missing, which delayed my daughter coming out. The ward was on code red. It took 45 minutes to find him. I was then operated on to find out my placenta had abrupted inside me, and they struggled to get my daughter out. So they had to make a further cut in my stomach, which now, due to that, I will never be able to give birth naturally. My daughter came out at 11:16 a.m, not breathing. It took 7 minutes to resuscitate her. I had clumps of placenta floating around my stomach and had to be put to sleep for further surgery. We were led to believe she was fine, but we weren't able to see her. We were told they was just waiting for her to urinate. She was later transferred to LRI, which was when we were finally told the truth. She had a bleed on her brain due to being left inside me too long with no oxygen. Her nappy was filling with blood, and within the space of a few hours we were told she would be highly disabled and to get your family here to meet her, as it would be in their best interests to turn her life support machine off. After turning her life support machine off, I was then told I was going to be put back on the maternity ward around all the other mothers and babies. There was no way in this world I was going to be around all these babies. Once our investigation was over, we were told a lot of things that could have prevented all of this, and was told she was taken out at around 7 a.m. She would be alive right now, and those vital few hours made all the difference. Yet we were left to suffer, and now have a lifetime full of pain through a choice of a fully qualified consultant. We were also told he would have known of her life expectancy would be short due to the abruption, yet he told us she would be home with us for Christmas, and not to worry. We believed in them, and it later proved that it was all a lie. All that happened to the consultant responsible for our baby girl's death was that he was audited, and we are both now changed forever. I was pushed out in a wheelchair, holding her memory box, and that's all I have of my daughter, just a memory. Amelia Bradley wants to tell Theo's story. My pregnancy was a typical normal pregnancy. I attended all the antenatal appointments and was deemed as low risk. On the 13th of September 2023, I attended Kingsmill Hospital in the evening, despite being booked a home birth to get some pain relief. On the first admission to the Sherwood birthing unit, I was left waiting for 40 minutes before being told by a supporting midwife that they were really busy and someone would see me shortly. 30 minutes later, the same midwife returned to complete my original triage assessment, something that should have been undertaken within 15 minutes of arrival at the hospital. This midwife apologised for the delays and started my assessment immediately when she came back into the room. She told me that I was between 1 and 2 centimetres dilated and that my cervix still had some changes to make until I was in active labour. She still deemed me as low risk, gave me a codeine tablet and said that I would be suitable for home birth, as the only pain relief I could get with a water birth would be gas and air. I got home around midnight and got into my birthing pool before leaving it to use the toilet at around 12:30 on the 14th of September. I had 2 contractions on the toilet and felt a pop, which was followed by bleeding. I put on a pad to monitor the bleeding, and within 2 to 3 minutes it was full. Luke rang the birthing unit and put the phone on loudspeaker so I could consent to them talking to Luke and my mum because of how much pain I was in, and I couldn't speak for myself. They asked, if I'd lost more than a teaspoon of blood, to which my mum said, yes, it's like a heavy period, but pure blood. The midwife didn't ask any questions about the pain I was in and didn't try to gather further information about the amount of blood loss. She told me to come back to the hospital. We returned to the hospital just before 1 a.m. and on getting into the ward at 1:05, we was put into a triage room. 10 minutes later, a support worker came to take my observations, but ignored my mum when she tried to show her the blood-filled pad, and then failed to alert any of the midwives that I was bleeding. After being in the room for 37 minutes, while 2 triage midwives, a labour ward coordinator, and several other members of staff were sat around their nursing station, discussing how many Haribos they'd eaten on the shift, and how many midwives were on the bank shifts, were getting paid more, never did a midwife enter the room. When a midwife did enter, she took a look at the pad and her face dropped, noting the seriousness of my condition. She couldn't find Theo's heart rate, so went to get support and a Doppler to see if this could pick up the heart rate. She found him to be bradycardic, and issued a 222 emergency. The consultant came and ordered for a Category 1 C-section to take place. Baby died. This is a story of Hayley Moore. My story had previous placenta eruption in 2021 and was very lucky. I was picked up. I was straight down to the theatre for an emergency C-section. But this time around, I was very anxious about it happening again and was questioning the consultant. He said I was only under him because it was a small baby last time and I wanted a planned C-section. But he kept pushing me to go natural on full term. I went in on the 17th of February with reduced movements and pains and was hooked up to the monitor and was told I can't be having contractions, so I was sent home on the 19th for a scan. I felt it was rushed, but I don't feel right that the baby had grown and looked fine and felt movement in the early hours the next morning by 10 a.m. on the 20th. I was at home in agony, I rang the birthing unit, they told me to go down, so I went down for an assessment and the midwife came and checked for the heartbeat and had to wait for a scan and moved down to room 11 where the bereavement midwife came up and the doctor was pushing me to go natural again as I was stable. The midwife at the time, along with my sister, was pushing for my C-section, which in the end I did get rushed for a C-section, and again my placenta had erupted. The aftercare I had erupted. The aftercare I received from midwife Holly was outstanding. That's 4 stories, Mr. Dow. I recently visited Kingsmill Hospital, where to the maternity unit, where I managed to walk round with the chief nurse, Mr. Phil Bolton. It's a brilliant facility they have at Kingsmill Hospital. And the problem hospitals get is that the headlines in the newspapers are always bad headlines for hospitals. You never see a front page of a local paper saying hospital saves a life, because that's what they do every single day. And mistakes have been made, and individuals have made mistakes, but I've also got to say I'm incredibly proud of Kingsmill Hospital. It's where I was born. It's where my children were born, and it's probably the place where I'll leave this earth when I eventually go. I've got no plans to do that just yet, though. But it is a brilliant hospital, but mistakes have been made. But Kingsmill Hospital acknowledge the mistakes as well, and then they're putting measures in place, and I've learned from some of the heartbreaking stories we've had today. But I'm not here really to talk about Kingsmill Hospital. I'm here to talk about my constituents who have suffered the most horrendous grief. And baby loss will always happen, we know that, but these are preventable deaths, and we must do all we can in this place to ensure that our National Health Service has the support it needs to make sure we reduce baby loss. We know about the Ockenden report in Nottingham. For me, some of the readings, some of the news coming out there is quite shocking. I fear sometimes that we treat the birth of babies as like a production line sometimes, and it's not. It's very personal, it's very emotive. Every single family is completely different. Mums and dads are different. And I think that you know, if we can learn anything from today's debate, is that every single family in this country, I think, from the families I've spoken to, it touches every single family, baby loss does. Somebody along the line knows somebody who's related to somebody who's had baby loss, whether that be a miscarriage or during childbirth or postnatal. So I would ask the ministerial team today to please, you know, have a look at my constituents here. I know it's not always possible to empathise because we've not all been through the same thing, but please reassure them that they've been listened to, because this is the, I can't go any higher than this. You know, we've got the complaints in, we've got the solicitors involved, but for me as a Member of Parliament, the only thing I can do really is listen to them, listen to their stories, and bring them to this place here and let them see, you know, the people who are running this country, and ensure that you listen to their story and you act on the facts that I've given you today. Thank you, Mr. Dow.